Hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor, subscribe to the John Keim Report wherever you get your podcast. You're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. You can find us there as part of Ampire Media. That's Ampire. Always much appreciated when you tune in. And don't forget, you can read my work on ESPN.com. I'll have a story up some point this week about the offensive line. I've talked about it a couple of times. And really what I want to kind of do is look at it not just from oh my gosh, all these guys are out and they were, line really had some struggles last year, blah, blah, blah. It's really kind of a look at how can this be different or better for them, right? And why they may feel better about it than maybe the outside world does. And ways that little things that have changed or can change that helps this group compared to last year. I mean, first of all, it's going to be a new group. By and large, it's 3 new starters. Secondly, there were just a lot of things that like the coaching is going to be so much better, not just from a play calling. I also think the offensive, I don't think they were well coached last year as a line unit, right? So I think you take all that into consideration when you're looking at this. And then, how does the play calling impact? How does Jayden Daniels impact the offensive line? And even the other day, and talking to some of the people here about when you watch the quarterbacks the other day and the quick decision making that they had, the quick throws that were set up for them by Kingsbury, that was all really good. And so they looked prepared, and nobody was sitting there holding the ball a long time. We'll see if that continues. I'm sure there are going to be games where they're going to have some issues, but you saw linemen getting beat, but you didn't see quarterbacks getting destroyed. And so that's a good thing. Now again, you cannot consistently lose that. And some of these guys losing were backups, and there were a couple, Nick Allegre, I thought his run blocker had some good moments. I think there was one pass pro that he struggled or that he gave up, but they weren't. And, Chris Paul gave up one, but it didn't hurt them. So that's a good sign for now. We'll see where it goes. The other part is how they marry the run pass concepts, specifically out of play action, because I know that's been a problem here. And if you can make it look the same, then you're in a good spot. So I think that's something to watch as we go forward, because that's one thing that Dan Quinn talked about with Kingsbury. Anyway, all that will be in there. So that'll be coming out pretty soon. In a few minutes, I'll be little more than a few minutes, I'll be joined by Terry McLaurin. I interviewed him a week or so ago about his connection with Jayden Daniels. Is lucky number 11 the guy for Terry McLaurin? He's had 10 other starters, and would have been 11 had Jacoby Brissett started the one game last year he was supposed to or was going to. But maybe he's finally found one. And I think I can tell you, in talking to him and watching his body language, he really thinks that this guy can play and that he can develop this connection with him, because I think he's already feeling like that's happening. In fact, we saw that again today. Today. I'm taping this on Tuesday. Saw it again today in practice. And I talked about this on the podcast yesterday, or on Tuesday, the one that came out Tuesday. Getting messed up here, folks. But on that one, I talked about the play in the red zone where pressure's coming. You got your guy McLaurin on the outside. He drifts back, slides gets away from the pressure, because that knows where the pressure comes from, gives McLaurin a chance at the ball and makes the catch. So those are good things that are happening. You see the connection developing between the two. And so that's why I want to talk to McLaurin a little bit more. Now, there were times at the podium he talked about it. So I'm sure you've heard some of this, but I did find it interesting to talk to Terry about this, and I thought you would enjoy it as well. So if you want to skip right to that part, it's about the last 4.5, 5 minutes of the interview, and it is an audio interview. I know people always say why or not. Well, they do if I don't explain. But part of the thing is, when you're sitting there talking to a guy one-on-one, I get far better answers than if you're sitting there holding a phone up in their face to record the video. You get better answers. It's just you're talking to another person versus talking to a camera. It's a big difference. So there are times where you can use it and it's good, but in those little settings, I know I get better answers this way, because it's a conversation versus an interview on a camera. So it's just different. Anyways, about 4.5, 5 minutes, go right to the end. But I do want to talk about the receivers before we get there, and with Jayden Daniels, because it's very important. And I will say, when you talk to the receivers, like, they're pretty excited about this young man, and with good reason. And I was even talking to Jahan Dotz about him on Tuesday, and you know, they know that he's going to give them a chance. And the receivers all know that. And I think that is a really good thing. If you're winning at the line, he's going to give you a chance to get the ball. So you got to win at the line. And that's one thing that McLaurin talked about with De'Ami Brown against the Jets, where he gets that 42-yard play. He won at the line of scrimmage. And I'll get into that in a minute. But the point is, these guys are excited because they feel like they have a guy who can help them make a play and isn't just going to look away, because there have definitely been times in the past, and this is one of the things that Dotson talked about, that when I talked to him about this, that there are definitely times in the past where a quarterback, they might look off you too soon because, oh, you didn't win right away, now you're done. And so they don't stick with you, they don't give you a chance to make the play. Now sometimes if the guy doesn't have it, you're going to get off that, but there are times where you could look at it and say too soon. And the other day, I think maybe some others look off that because De'Ami does win at the line of scrimmage. And he does, well, the corner's a couple yards off him because De'Ami's kind of set back a little bit. So it wasn't like it was just a press coverage and boom, you're gone. But after a few steps, he starts to get him. So it gives Daniels the ability to stick with him. But also, I do think that, it takes a minute. It's not like you're separating right away. It wasn't like that. So he did have patience with it. He knew that's where he had to go and could go. That was a really good matchup. There were none of the other matchups were going to, well, actually, Eckler in the slot did a nice job against linebacker. Dust gets by him, but the safety would have covered that one up. So anyway, just a good job by him. But that's why these guys are excited, because they see a quarterback willing to give them a chance to make a play. And as Dotson told me, like, these guys are here because they make contested catches. In college, De'Ami Brown that was one of the things he did well. That was one of the things Jahan Dotson did well, as well. I mean, he made some circus catches when he was at Penn State. So you have a guy like that that's gonna help them. Now I don't think he's had the kind of camp that I thought he might. I still see a value in him because of his ability to run after the catch. And I think that's going to be a big part of this offense. So I don't think we've seen how it's all going to look. I will say he's not the guy down the field always making a play. He's made some, but I will be curious to see, because he's a guy that we saw this 2 years ago in some of those games where you get him the ball. If you give him the ball in time and in rhythm, he can make play. He can get a lot of yards after the catch. So that's one of the things I think to pay attention to as we move forward with him, is how that evolves. And, again, I don't think he's had the greatest camp. I don't think it's been horrible. I think it's, has it been what you expected? Probably not. But, and I also wonder, anytime you have a guy in that situation, we've talked about it with Emmanuel Forbes and some others for Darian Mathis, how do they view them, and how do they view them moving forward? So I do think when you look at this, and this kind of goes back to the Martavis Bryant signing, and also Pringle. I mean, they had Pringle in the spring too, and then cut him and brought him back. They worked out Bryant in the spring, didn't sign him, and then after a couple of weeks of camp, then they sign him. So there's clearly something they want to see a little bit more of from this group. I don't think these guys are displacing somebody else. I haven't seen what Brian just got here, and with Pringle, it's not like you've seen him just torch guys. It's just that's not the case. But both are 4-4 guys, and so they can get down the field, and Brian offers the size and to do that. So, but I still think that those guys are fighting for those last spots right now, based on the roster they have. Based on how they've been using guys. It's basically the first three have been McLaurin, Dotson, De'Ami Brown. So anyway, I think that's still in flux. But the good thing for that group is, again, for De'Ami and Terry, I think they're going to be guys getting downfield more. For Dotson, I think the good thing for him is when you have a guy that can get to that third read in rhythm, it then gives him more chances to run after the catch. I'll also be curious. I keep telling you saying this because I think it's worthwhile. But even one of the catches Dotson had the other day was out of a bunch formation on the right against zone coverage, but it was bunch formation. I think that's where he's kind of works better, because it's a little bit harder to get your hands on the guy in that situation. And so how are they going to use him in those regards? So, and the other one that to watch would be Luke McCaffrey. Again, has not jumped out this summer. I don't think he looks like a guy who's going to come and make this awesome impact right away. If he does, more power to him. It's just not what we've seen so far. But where I do think you can see him helping them initially, he can do some things inside. He's got good size to do that. And, I think he can work out the slot in those areas. That will help. That could help. I think he can be a little bit more physical. That will help. But also on the jet sweeps, I think he can do some stuff there too. And then some of that is also dependent on how you set it up, but I think he can run that well as well. So there are ways that he can help in addition to, you know, catching the ball, but I think he can run those jets as well. And Dotson has done that in the past too, but McCaffrey's a guy that has done a lot of that this summer. So, but again, overall, I think this group feels pretty good about where they're at with working with Jayden Daniels. And so I, as a group, I still would look at them and say, there's a lot more you need to see. I mean, even like, okay, De'Ami Brown has this big catch, but we've seen him have big catches in games before. You want to see the consistency. And so if you're De'Ami Brown, like what do you do against the Dolphins in the joint practice? What do you do against them in the game? Same for Dotson. You do want to start seeing a little bit more consistency in that regard, and maybe a big play or two after the catch. So like McLaurin, we know what he's going to do. I think Zacchaeus has been consistent throughout camp as well. But he's coming off a year where he didn't do a whole lot, and a couple of years ago he did, or did more. So I think there are definitely questions about what this group can be. I think what also helps them is having Zach Ertz here and Ben Sinnott and Austin Eckler. I think you can then develop other areas of the passing game in the middle of the field, and that's where you see Ertz making a lot of noise during practices, especially. And we saw what Sinnott did the other day, but that if those guys produce, then it lessens the burden on the outside guys. But you do have a quarterback who's really good at throwing to those outside guys. So you want to work that, which is why I think you're going to consistently look to add speed to the outside and give a guy like, in their best case scenario, Bryant comes through and you have a big guy who can get down the sidelines. Maybe he's not what people thought he was going to be 6-7 years ago, but can he go out and make a big play for you once in a while down the field? If he can get to that, that's great. But, I think I told you yesterday, right now, I look at him as like, okay, he's a guy you could keep around in the practice squad and then see how it develops from there. So, but I think, you can see how they can be helped by him. But I also, like, one of the things that McLaurin talked about with De'Ami Brown was that he liked about that play is, again, winning at the line. So it wasn't press coverage. It was press, but there was no jam on the play. But what happened is after a few yards, you could see Brown kind of slaps the defensive back's hand down, and that allows him just to kind of maintain and get an advantage to the outside where you can start to win. And McLaurin said that that's one of the things that he felt that De'Ami Brown was working on this offseason. Again, to me, he's still got to go out there and be consistent in the regular season. Until we see that, that's what you want to see. I also want to see these guys against a starting unit. And it's hard, like when you watch a joint practice, and I told you I'm not going to be in there in Miami, but when you watch a joint practices, it's really hard to see all. Like you can see part of a play, but if you're looking at the wrong spot, it's hard. You're going to miss something. So there are times when I'm in practice, and what I always do is I'm going to pick out a matchup that I want to watch on this particular play. Sometimes you might step back and watch a big picture play because I want to see the quarterback and how the footwork, et cetera. But other times I'm going to like, okay, here's a good receiver corner matchup. Let's see how Emmanuel Forbes handles this matchup against McLaurin or against Dotson or whatever. And so that's what I do. But what happens is you miss things. The play may go to the other side, a block may be here, and you missed it because you're watching this. But it also helps you gain information on these particular players. If you try to see all, it's going to be hard to see anything. But when you're watching, so that happens in joint practice too. And when you see them in a game, you're able to go back and watch it and see how each individual did and measure it that way. That's all to say that, I'd like to see them in those settings to see more, to learn more about these guys, because in the game the other day, it's the Jets backups. So what I'd like to see is Daniels, a similar situation facing a starting safety, and see how that safety reacts to how he handled the fake, et cetera. I mean, there's a lot of good. I mean, I'm telling you, like, they were really happy with that play, as they should be. But I also am curious to see, how does a top safety handle that same situation And then how does Daniels handle that as well? That's where you start to learn. Then you learn more and more and more about him. I think that's what I'm hoping that there's more of those matchups, whether it's in the joints or in the game itself. I don't know if that will, because again, same like Miami's like the Jets, they're further along in their program than what Washington is with theirs. So some of their guys are going to play a little bit more just because of that. And that's fine. Like, you're still going to get good work. And that's the whole point of it. They need to build this up. They're not a finished product by any means. So you want to build that up. But you also still want to see how it looks against this, baby steps with that. And I know you get in practice, but they're not facing the top half corners in practice. So, it turned top half of the league corners in practice. So in St. Jude's, Forbes, et cetera. So I think that it's good to see that in those joint practices, but I do like to see it in the game as well. And for me personally, it gives me a better chance to get a lot more information when you see that in a game. And so that's what I'm hoping to see this week, but see more of that, to see how much they're progressing, because you do see it. I mean, you do see it with Daniels. I mean, and listen, like, they haven't named the starter, but he's taking all the first team reps. I mean, there's no doubt about that. And there's no doubt where it's headed, and it's where it should be, because there's been no reason to think, oh, he's not ready, or, oh, somebody else looks better. We've seen that here before, but because maybe it's a certain pick or whatever, that they've got to play. But in this case, he is the best quarterback in camp. And Marcus Mariota, offers things, but he has not looked like Jayden Daniels has. So that's why we're in that spot. But again, where it goes, we'll see. But in the Miami situation, it'd be nice to see, I'm just curious to see what more we learn from not just the joint practice, but the game, because there's a lot more to learn and more steps to go to see, where he's at. It's fun watching his progress. I'll be honest, and I love diving into that play the other day, and just the mechanics of the position that he handles. And, I think there's a lot of very good, legitimate reason for optimism with him. And one of those goes back to the Terry McLaurin, the chemistry that they're developing. And I think you're starting to see it for sure. And again, I know McLaurin is pretty damn excited about what he possibly could have with Jayden Daniels. So with all that being said, here's my conversation with Terry McLaurin. Again, it'll be about 5 minutes long. Enjoy it. And I'll be back. Before you listen to it, I'll tell you, I'll be back on Thursday. Again, I told you I'm not going to be at the joint practice, but I will be talking to Nikki Javala, who will be at the joint practice, so I can bring you information about what she saw from practice, and we'll go from there. Stay tuned for Terry McLaurin.
Doing, man? Hey, good. How are you?
I'm all right.
You good?
Wale, huh?
Yeah.
What I wanted to do is just we asked you the other day about, we've talked about over the years about working with one guy.
Mm-hmm.
How much, when you see a young guy like this come in, do you start to envision the future for the two of you together?
I definitely try not to put the cart before the horse, but it's hard not to get excited the way he's come in and just been so prepared. I play with a lot of first-time quarterbacks, and he plays like this is not going to be his first time really playing in this league. He has a lot of experience, obviously from college, but just he has a great feel for the game. And he's a guy who's going to give you opportunities to make plays down the field, but I just think his timing, his anticipation is very on point for a guy who's so young in his career. His ball placement is something that just really stands out, and it's fun for a guy like me because a lot of times I'm winning early in my routes, but whether the time is off or the anticipation may not be there, that's the difference between a catch and no catch, or even a contested catch. And with him, we're catching a lot of passes where I have some room to run after. It's right in front of me. I'm catching it in stride. So it's hard not to be excited, but I just want to continue to put it in, day out, and just get all the reps that we can. So every time a play comes up that I know that it'll probably be a play that I'll get in the game, I want to be out there, you know what I mean, so we could talk through it and try to hit on it.
Like the back shoulder today. Is that any – because that's when I remember talking to you last year. You want those back shoulders because that's an example of maybe getting on the same page and a rhythm. Is that correct? And do you see more of that now?
Yeah. I definitely think that's again, naturally that's a feel, you know what I mean? I think we've had the communication, or if a DB's kind of on top of the route, then feel comfortable back shouldering it. And yesterday we were working in the red zone. I asked him, like, where do you see the ball being on a back shoulder? And he threw it right where he felt like it was going to be. And I'm like, I could work with that.
Okay.
Versus the guys in the trail, where do you see that ball? And it's on the outside shoulder, 42 yards down the red line. So on that, it was a different rep because I'm in the slot, and I'm going to get some opportunities in the slot this year. And I'm trying to do a better job of just saving the space like I did and just allowing the quarterback to throw me to the spot.
Okay.
And it just helps a lot when you have a guy who understands that and you're able to, like, hit it on the first time. There hasn't been too many reps we had where it's like, we don't like that. We got to get it again. So you just want to continue to try to see the ball thrown and caught and talk through the little things that we need to improve on.
How much would you hear from guys around the league saying, like, I can't believe what you've done with so many different quarterbacks?
Yeah, I've definitely heard that a few times. And, I think you've known me for a long time. I've just really focused on controlling what I can in those moments where, it may be a little unsure who's going to be there at the quarterback or you don't know how many touches you're going to get. So I've kind of had to be comfortable just being ready for whatever moment comes my way. And I think a lot of people can't necessarily appreciate how challenging it is because if you look at the top receivers in the league, those top 5 guys, they have, I say, one of 3 things. They have obviously the talent. They have a coach that's going to scheme them and get them the ball, get them the touches. Then you got a quarterback and receiver connection. And, I've had one of the 3 or 2 of the 3 at moments and times in my career, but hopefully this year we have all 3, and I think it could really take my game to the next level and help him as well because when you have an opportunity to get one-on-ones, that forces the safety to kind of maybe cheat to your side.
Sure.
Now everybody else is getting favorable matchups.
And last thing on this then, how do you build on that? Like, and how is it just the process of communication and obviously reps?
Right.
But, like, what things, if you envision it down the road, a year from now, 2 years from now, what things would happen just because of being able to finally build with a guy?
Honestly, I think you don't necessarily have to – I'm not going to say you don't have to, like, work as hard, but you don't have to start from ground zero, kind of like I said when I was talking to you guys the first time. Like, the last few years I've had to start from ground zero because each quarterback sees things differently. Their timing is different. The ball placement may be a little different. And so when you get a guy that you have 2, 3, 4 years that you can build with, you're not starting from ground zero. You build through the year. You have ups and downs. But at the end of the season, you have that ending point. Then we get some working in the spring and the off season together. And then you start from here versus down at the beginner level. And that just helps you get on track faster. We're going to have some hiccups, obviously, because we got to get into game scenario situations. But just his natural feel for the game and mine as well, I think that's already accelerated the process with him being a rookie. So I'm excited to continue to build on that. And he's just always looking to get work with me. I love that.